All right, let's talk about networking a little bit more. But I want to focus more so on port numbers and what ports even are, and the actual physical tools that we use to troubleshoot our network issues. So let's take a look first and foremost at what ports and protocols are. Now, we've explored different kind of connections, high speed and really, really slow or high latency connections. And now we're ready to see how that data actually transfers around on our network. So we're going to look at TCP and UDP sections, and we're going to look at some of the actual port numbers that our data is going over. So what is a port? Well, it's an endpoint of a logical connection. Now, we use ports in two different ways. In our physical ports, when we're looking at laptop and PC cards that we interact with and plug things into, those are physical ports. But in this section, we are talking about logical connections, so logical ports. Any client computer can connect to a specific server pretty much anywhere, but you have to get that data going over an appropriate freeway per se. So let's say you're headed between Los Angeles and Florida. Well, the freeway you're going to be on is the 10 freeway. The same thing happens here. What kind of data and what point A and point B is going to determine what port you should be communicating on or that data should be traveling on. Now, all ports are assigned a number, and the range is from 0 to 65,535. You are not going to have to memorize all of those ports, I promise, but some of them you are going to. Now, there are ranges that are important here that you need to know. 0 through 123, or excuse me, 1023, are what are called well-known ports. And these are where the majority of your ports that you'll need to memorize come from. Now, does that mean you're going to be memorizing 1,000 port numbers? No, not at all. But the 15, 20, maybe 25 that we're going to be going over, all but a few are going to come out of this range. So 0 through 1023 are well-known ports. Now, registered ports start at 1024 and go up to 49,151. These are registered with software developers or makers to use specific applications and services that are not as well known as the ones that we use for the 0 through 1023. So stuff like QuickTime or streaming services. Xbox Live has a port in this range. Some of the more popular games that we play have specific ports in this range. Now, the dynamic or private ports are set aside for unregistered services. And if you ever need a temporary connection or a temporary port number assigned, you'll get one from this range. And that range starts at 49,152 and goes all the way up to 65,535. Now, some of the more common ports are the ones you see on your screen. Now, I will add some numbers to this list for you to memorize, and I'll tell you that some of these are not as important anymore. You also have a list in your book as well as in your exam cram sheet, which is that little fold-out thing that was in the very front of your book. And that's going to have some of your most popular port numbers as well. Just a quick tip for where to look. On your cram sheet itself is number 25. So I'm starting on the second page and wrapping around to AKA the third page, I guess, is where you're going to find some popular port numbers. But I would spend some time in your book and look at what are the specifics to these. So let's go through them. You see 21, but I want you on your flashcards or your notes to add 20 and 21. Those two are both FTP or file transfer protocol. 22 is good, that stands for secure shell. 23 is telnet, that should be used. 25 is super important, simple mail transport protocol. 53 is DNS or domain name system. 80, HTTP. Now this is unsecured, but it's hypertext transfer protocol. POP3 is your post office protocol version 3, and that's 110. 137 is NetBIOS, which stands for Network Basic Input Output System. And to be honest, this is kind of like a naming service per se. And that's 137 and 138. And you'll see that it actually goes over quite a few port numbers, but 137, 138 is what you can remember. We don't too much use 139 at the A+ level. Just to let you know what each of those are in regards to 138 and 139 is 138 is the NetBIOS diagram distribution service, which is how it puts out information, and 139 is actually the session service, so how it communicates. 143 is IMAP, and that's the more advanced version of how to receive email. It stands for Internet Message Access Protocol. 427 is not something you'll see in your exam too much, but it just depends on your job per se if you'll interact here. But that stands for Service Location Protocol, and it's used by a specific service within a browser to find out where you are. Now, 443 is definitely important for your entire life homework and test. HTTPS stands for HTTP Secure. The S actually stands for SSL/TLS, so it's a pretty long acronym when you say it all out. Hypertext Transfer Protocol, Secure Socket Layer, Transport Layer Security. Now, you are not going to need that entire thing in your brain to get through your test or real life, but you need to understand that this is the secure version of HTTP, which is port 80, and that this is where you see the little green lock in the corner when you visit a website. That means it's HTTPS and transferring data on port 443. 445 is awesome, Server Message Block, and you see CIFS, which stands for Common Internet File System, but servers SMB is what matters here, and that's what allows us to communicate between different types of applications and operating systems. AFP is 548, and this is the Apple Filing Protocol. 3389, so that's one of the more important protocols that is outside of that more well-known range. And RDP stands for Remote Desktop Protocol, one of the most important. So that's a quick summarized version of the ones that you see on your screen, but like I said, we'll be adding a few to this list as we go through the course. One of the first ones I want to add for you is port number 123, and it stands for NTP, or Network Time Protocol, and this is how you keep time synchronized on your entire network, and that is super important. LDAP is the Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. It's a protocol that defines how a client can access information, perform operations, and share any directory data on a directory server. It was made specifically for TCP/IP networks on the internet in particular, but the majority of the implementation for LDAP relies on DNS service. So the first thing that happens is DNS enables clients to find the server that hosts the LDAP directory, and then the LDAP servers can enable clients to find directory objects. Well, what does all that mean? Okay, this means that every device on your network needs to be able to access a list of what it can and can't talk to, what resources that it's allowed to interact with, and its own information as well. So directories are pretty much long lists of names, objects, devices, anything on your network. And this is how you access that information. LDAP does have a port number, and it's port 389. Please do not get that confused with 3389, which is RDP. Now, SNMP is Simple Network Management Protocol, and this is used to collect information from all network devices, and there's diagnostic and maintenance information behind there, meaning that you can see what's going on and do some troubleshooting if necessary. Now, there's two different components to SNMP, and that's why there are two different port numbers it uses. First, it has a management system, and kind of like agent software per se, and that's installed on the network device. So the printers, the servers, the routers, all that kind of good stuff. Now the agent sends information to the SNMP manager, and then the manager can notify an administrator of any problems. So if you have an issue in the script or the program, or you want to store information for a later review, then this is how that all works. And SNMP operates on port 161 and 162. All right. We talked about SMB, and I want to touch base on this one again. Server message block. This is a protocol that helps share resources, files, printers, different ports even among different computers. So you have a client, let's say a Windows system, that's using NetBIOS over the internet or the network to connect different servers and devices. Then your SMB or your server message block commands to complete tasks by accessing different shared files and printers. That means a server and an end device can, per se, talk to each other. Again, this is port 445. That's the most common port used with server message block. Now, the other one that was attached to that was the Common Internet File System. And this is what enables users on different computing platforms to share files without having to install additional software. So the newer version of SMB is CIFS. And that's why I said I don't want you guys to worry about both. In your testing environment, you're probably going to see server message block. But in real life, you will be dealing with CIFS, or Common Internet File System. And let's just talk about Windows because, well, Windows is the leader here. So the protocol here lets Windows users have file and printer access and be able to share all of that with different versions of Windows or non-Windows operating systems. So you can open and share files over the internet in their native application and not have to go through a web browser per se. So you've probably come across Windows 365 or some type of cloud-hosted version like it, where you're able to open a Word document via the internet and collaborate with other users. But you're not necessarily in a browser window. You can actually do this through the Windows Word app or Excel or whatever type of file it actually is. So that's what CIFS does for us. Again, still using port 445. All right. SSH is awesome. Secure Shell. This is what lets users actually log on to another computer over the network. So this is the first step of remoting into a computer per se. Not only can you log in, but you can execute commands, open and manage files. It's going to provide some pretty strong authentication methods in regards to the login attempt or the method that you're going to authenticate to this computer that you're remoting into. And you're going to have a secure communication session, even if you're transferring data over an insecure channel. Okay. So what's the magic here and how does this stuff work? Well, this is just a more secure version of a remote connection program, and most base level or non-SSH programs will actually transmit your passwords and data unencrypted, like Telnet did. But with SSH, you can use a command where your entire login session, including your password, is encrypted, and that will protect you against being attacked. That is port 22. AFP is the Apple File Protocol, and it's been around forever, since the 80s. That's not super forever, but forever in the IT world. It was introduced as part of the original Apple Talk network system, so you can kind of think back and see, first, is that something you've even ever heard of? And if it has, are you one of those users? Now, originally it was for Macs communicating with other Macs, and this is how it's still often used. It started with OS X Mavericks and has just been growing since, per se. It's kind of become the new server message block or version 2, and it made a cross-platform jump when it was able to file share faster, easier, and more secure with non-Apple systems, aka Windows. So AFP uses port 548. That was a lot, and that's for your flashcards. Remember those. Use them, use the notes, make it happen. Now we're going to jump into hardware networking tools. So whenever we're working with a network, things can definitely change, and you might need to make new cables or test what's going on for network connectivity. So the first thing we're looking at here is a cable tester. And it's literally going to tell you that a signal either is or is not present and able to communicate in a network cable, aka Cat5. So a simple tester will tell you if both ends of the cable are terminated correctly, meaning all of those little wires inside line up the way that they're supposed to. Fancier ones can tell you where the shorts are, meaning that cable number 2 and 3 are not as long as they need to be or aren't necessarily making a good connection. Cable strippers are something that are pretty straightforward. These are wire strippers, and you're just going to be using those to take off the protective coating on the outside of your cables. Now, most crimpers actually have a stripper. Most crimpers have a cable stripper built in. So wire crimpers are the thing that we'll use to attach a connector to an end of a cable. So when we talk about terminating a cable, you're using crimpers to attach that RJ45 or RJ11 to the end of an Ethernet cable. You can use it to make your own network cords, or if you need to trim the end of a cable and re-terminate because something's happened to the connector. Most often, the clippy part that secures it in place has broken, so you just need to put a new connector on it. You'll use your crimper to get through an adventure like that. Multimeters are an electronic instrument that are used to measure voltage, current, and resistance. So there's usually 2 probes on it with leads. There's a red and a black one, and they're plugged into 2 different sockets on the meter. And they switch between, or you can see the difference in volts, ohms, and amps. And you can move it to different sockets and test how much power is coming through. A digital meter has a screen that displays the numeric value, and the analogs have that little needle that will swing and let you know how much power is coming through the volt itself. Tone generators. Now, this was one of the first tools I used when I was a network student myself. And this is a little device that sends an electrical signal through a set of UTP wires, meaning that one end I put to the actual port on the wall. And then I go in a building to the server room or wire closet or wherever I'm looking for the other end of where the wire is going to be connected to on the other side. So it emits an audible tone, meaning it makes a noise in the wire, and that's how I can detect where the other side of the wire is. I'm looking for both ends. The tone generator is most commonly used on telephone systems to trace the wire pair, but you can use them pretty much anywhere you have Cat3 or Cat5 being used. Loopback plugs are simple and effective devices. So any tool or any time that you have a NIC that needs to be tested, meaning I need to diagnose a transmission issue, I can use a loopback plug. I just want to see if this thing is online and able to send and receive data. So I'll plug it in and it'll light up and tell me. A punch-down tool is used in a wiring closet, and this is where you connect cable wires directly to a patch panel. This tool actually strips the insulation from the end of the wire, so it's going to expose the little copper wires inside. And then we're going to embed the wire into the connection at the back of the panel. This is how you create the female end of a port. So when you're going to plug a Cat5 cable in to your RJ45, you're going to put it into the port, the physical port. Then it needs to connect to something on the other side. And this is what a punch-down tool makes possible. Now, if this is kind of hard to understand, obviously you're just looking at the tool on screen, then there are lots of videos that you can go take a look at see how a punch-down tool works. And I'll actually post some good videos so you can see this in your Google Classroom. So be on the lookout for that just under the link to this video. Awesome. A Wi-Fi analyzer is a really cool tool. We usually call it a spectrum analyzer, and all we're doing here is trying to detect if devices have good coverage. If your Wi-Fi coverage is good, your access point is creating the coverage that you need. So it's just going to display the variation of signal strength against the actual frequency. I can take this and walk around a room or a full building and see where are the dead spots or where is my signal not reaching so that I can put another access point or some type of booster there. So now that we've talked about the hardware tools, we definitely have some software or command line tools specifically. And I'm going to go through this list pretty quickly. And this is where you're going to start becoming familiar with your command line. So I showed you an example in previous lessons of going to your start menu, typing in CMD on a Windows machine, and it'll open your command prompt. And you can use these tools there. None of these tools are going to hurt you because you can't make any changes with the tools that you see here on screen. They're just diagnostic tools so you can see what's going on with your system. ipconfig is just there to help us verify the TCP IP addressing. Now, if we go beyond ipconfig and use different, how do I want to say it? If you add some very specific characters, you can actually release and renew your IP address and get a new one issued to you from the DHCP. Now, a quick note here is that in Linux and Unix systems, you use ifconfig, F as in foxtrot, instead of ipconfig. Same tool, different name. Ping is just to connect to or test your connection to a network. And there's lots of characters that you can add on the end of the ping command to do some different things with a ping. But a ping is an internet control message per se. I just want to ping myself to make sure I'm online. I want to ping you if you're in a local, maybe you're sitting next to me and I want to see if you're online. I'll ping you. Now, people in IT use this word, and it's appropriate if you understand what it means. If somebody says, I'll ping you later, that means they will reach out and see if you're available. So I'm sure you've heard somebody in IT say, I'll ping you. They're literally just reaching out to see if you're online and available. And that's what we do in the digital side as well. If I ping another computer or server or device, I'm seeing, are they online? Now, traceroute is a cool tool. This is going to let me not only see all of the hops between me and another device, but it's going to give me some information about each step my data request takes from me to the end device. It's going to determine and test all the points along a route for my data or where my data is being sent. So when I send a packet off into the internet, for us, normal end users, it's just out there. We don't really know how it gets to what we're requesting and then how that request gets fulfilled. But traceroute's one of the entry-level tools that we can use to see kind of how this works. When you get the opportunity, open your command prompt and type in trace RT and a space and see how, and pick your favorite website. Doesn't matter what it is. Enter your website after that space and see all the information you get back. Now, NS lookup is your name system lookup. Now, we talked about DNS, and this is what it's about. It verifies that your computer can connect to a DNS server and successfully find an IP address for any given computer name. So your computer has a name, and it's probably either your first name or your first name / computer. So this is what's going to help us find all that good stuff. Now, netstat is next, and it's going to show us the status for every active network connection. It's going to display the statistics for and protocol address and a little bit more information for every active device. Anything that's connected to the network, you can find that info there. Net overall is going to manage your Microsoft network resources from the command line. You can just type in net to your command prompt and look at some of the information that comes up. You'll see a lot of options as far as using net in combination with another command line tool to dive into some resource information. Now, the next ones that you see here are not necessarily command prompt commands. They're not something that you can type in into your command line and have some information. These are actually screens that you can go to interface with your network and see what's going on. So your device connection status is when you go to that little Wi-Fi symbol or you open your local area connection window and you're going to see what network you're on or where the breakdown is. Your network troubleshooters are going to be your help and support center pretty much, meaning when something goes wrong and Windows says it's going to try and diagnose the problem and then it finds nothing, that all takes place in your help and support center. You have learned a lot about networking and the different tools. Now, the one thing I want to say, and let me get you off of a black screen here. All right. So the one thing I want to add to that before we close out this lesson are some ipconfig tools for you. And there are some specific ones that I'd like to cover. Give me just a second. All right. So ipconfig can be used with additional or expansion commands that you can put into your command prompt to get more information than just the basics. And the first one I want you to do, if you're ready, is to go into your computer, open your command prompt if it's not already, and type in ipconfig/all, A-L-L. Now there should be a space between the G in ipconfig and the slash, okay? ipconfig/all. And you're going to be able to view your computer's host name, the DNS domain name, your network card driver, your IP address, subnet mask, your default gateway, lots of information. Now, I don't want you to do these, but I want you to be aware of the next few that I'm going to tell you. Now, ipconfig/release is how you're going to release the IP information that's assigned to your computer. You probably were assigned that information by your DHCP. Now you have no IP information. Now, if you actually did that, this video cut off, you're having to come back, and now you're caught back up. But how do you get an IP address back once you've released it? Well, you renew it. ipconfig/renew. And that's going to go get you a new lease or a new IP address from the DHCP server. That's it. So you have some new tools in your toolbox mentally. You may go out and take a look at those physical tools if you want to see how much they are or get some more information on them. Amazon, Newegg, Google in general is going to give you the info you need. And you also have some information in regards to some of your logical tools. So use these to your advantage, make your note cards, flashcards, and take your notes. And remember these because they're going to be useful to you at home, work, and on your tests. I will see you soon.